And whoever wins this election is going to be faced with some very, very tough choices. Now, New Zealand history tells us that the National Party, founded to look after the interests of business and the rural sector, will take one tack in the face of a major economic and social crisis. Labour, formed by the trade unions in the interests of working class New Zealanders, its instincts, its traditions will lead it to take another, a more protective.
Well, why don't they say
tack.
what it is?
Well, they're already saying what it is.
No, they're not. The current approach seems to me
they're going to bring forward
is to have a mini
infrastructure
budget.
programs.
No, is to have a mini
They're
budget
going to bring
in
forward
December.
spending programs.
I think it's
they're going to keep
extraordinary.
people in jobs.
The government has accused,
and that's what you'd expect the Labour Party to say.
has accused their opponents
the
of having a hidden agenda.
The thing that's really hard
a hidden
to
agenda, an art
understand.
form.
The thing that's really hard to understand, Matthew, is why the National Party is saying
what I think is different here is that we've got a situation where the government has made an art form of this. They have said, look, we're not really going to issue any policy prior to an election, but we are going to have a mini budget in December, and that's when you'll find out what our policy is.
Released the broad frame of their policy. The detail will come in a mini budget. Now, what is harder to... No, just let me have a say here. Just let me make this point, Matthew. What I find really hard to understand is not, Helen Clark's determination to look after our people, to look after jobs, to look after the framework of the welfare state. That's what you would expect Labour to do. What's much harder to believe, what's much harder to trust, is a National Party, which says in the face of a massive economic crisis, we are going to abandon every single economic and social principle that we have stood on for 70 years and behave almost in an indistinguishable way from the Labour Party. That's the hardest thing to believe.
With the exception, I think historically, with the exception of the government of the 1990s.
Don't cite me Holyoke, because that was through the most benign period in 150 years.
Tended to preside. I think stronger criticism could be put towards National at the moment that we've got this crisis and we've got an 11-point plan that...
Let's talk about the minor parties, because they may well have a strong input here. If the seat for Epsom seems to be relatively safe for Rodney Hyde, that means every party vote does count, and he could possibly get up to 4 MPs in the into the House. So maybe
on a good
if he gets 4%, maybe who knows what happens. Let's say 3, and Greens, they're on the other side. They might get how many? 10. They might get 10, 12, something like that.
12 MPs.
So that's a seriously thing. We've had, we've had Labour sort of with the middle C. They've been very simple, very small. Suddenly you've got very strong policy wishes from the Greens. You've got very strong policy wishes from the ACT Party. How much of an influence are those parties going to have on the major parties if either one of them gets to form an election? I'll start with you.
I'd say that ACT has absolutely nowhere to go whatsoever. I think Rodney Hyde will be appointed to the cabinet, and I assume he'll be given some associate finance minister role to look for waste, which is look for perks, so he can be the perk buster again. But they have no real leverage over the National Party at all. And I guess the other person who'll probably be there, probably only on his own, is the guy that likes to be the tax collector for National or Labour, Peter Dunn. I think that the same is true to some extent with the Greens, except I think the Greens will be there in larger numbers. I mean, interesting, we've been talking about this as if it's a presidential election. Can you trust Helen Clark? Yeah. If there is to be a Helen Clark-led government, it's going to be one which will require the support of, and I don't think this is in dispute, that would require the support of obviously Jim Anderton, of the Green Party, of the Maori Party, and potentially, if he has a good day, I know you think he's going to have a good day, Winston Peters.
That's only one more than National will need, isn't it?
But I just think the dynamics of a Green, New Zealand First, Labour, I think the management inside that government would be more difficult than keeping Rodney and Peter Dunn happy.
Well, New Zealand First probably, if we take those out of the equation for now, with the dynamics of a Labour, Greens, Māori Party with progressives in there, would be more frightening than a National ACT United Future?
Well, you'd have conflict between the Maori Party and the Green Party over property rights issues. Chris has written about this a lot, and you almost see, I think, the Maori Party as a almost reactionary type organisation.
I think there are very big questions for the Maori Party to ask on constitutional issues, on the question of property rights. on the question of nationhood, essentially. Are Maori part of the New Zealand nation, or are they separate from the New Zealand nation? Is the nation a colonial construct, or does it embrace all the people who live here? These are questions that simply haven't been asked, with the exception of yourself, Oliver, on Sunrise with Peter Sharples. And it just, it strikes me that once again, the media is letting something slide here. If Labour comes to power with the Greens and the Maori Party, it will be the most left-wing government in 70 years. There's no doubt of that. The Greens are a radical party of the left. The Maori Party, and if you look at its economic and its social policies, is a radical party as well.
Well, I don't quite.
It's got reactionary elements in terms of identity politics, racial issues, sovereignty issues. But dear God, look at the policies of the Greens and the Maori Party on matters economic, matters relating to health, matters relating to education, matters relating to the environment, particularly. Helen Clark's going to have her hands full if that's the thing she pulls together. And quite honestly, I think it'll either be Labour, Progressive, Green, Maori Party, or Labour, Progressive, Green, New Zealand First. I don't think you'll get New Zealand First and Maori
Matt, Chris,
on the same outfit.
Well, except the Green Party has said they won't work with Winston.
Oh, they've said they would find it difficult.
Matt,
it's not quite the same.
Chris is starting sounding more and more like Leighton Smith was the post on the Maori these days. There's a suggestion they might cut a deal with National. Chris wrote, can it be at all reasonable for the 70% of voters on the Māori roll who declined to offer their first allegiance to the New Zealand state to expect its Parliament to accede to Māori Party demands for a significant transfer of public resources from New Zealanders? To whom? After confiscation by legislation with forfeiture and seabed issue, are the left now frightened by an independent Māori who can actually work with National?
Well, I think in the last decade or two, there has been an emerging economic power block within Māoridom. And, you mentioned the foreshore and seabed issue. I think that was a reprehensible move by the Labour government. And interestingly, Māori on that issue were supported strongly by the Business Roundtable on issues of due process.
And National voted for that bill.
No, they voted against it, but for the wrong reasons, if you ask me. But I think there is a train of thought within the Maori Party that National could work with, I think, around those issues of property rights, and then on the issue of devolution of social services, depending on the extent to what the Maori Party means about that. If they mean providing parents with greater choice on which school to send their children, which would allow for further development of kura kaupapa Māori, then National's not going to have a problem with that at all. Yeah. I think, though, what you believe, Chris, is that it's a more radical. But that's the area around choice for individuals, family values, and property rights. The synergies between the Maori Party potentially and National, unless it's a more radical agenda than what I think it is.